Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick video since I'm not going to be able to be with you today. We're going to be reviewing some skills that you should already know how to do in reference to computing with fractions, which means adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with fractions. We're going to start with multiplying fractions because that tends to be the easiest thing for students to understand. So if I ask you to multiply with a set of fractions, if I ask you to multiply 4/5 and 2/3, then you're going to work with the numerators. So we're going to multiply straight across the numerators, and we're going to say 4 times 2 is 8, and then we're going to work with the denominators, and we're going to say 5 times 3 is 15. Then I look at this product, the answer to my multiplication question, and I ask myself, can that be simplified? Because 8 and 5 share no common factors, then that means this is the simplest form of that fraction. So my product is 8/15. This works with any fraction that you are given. All you have to do is multiply straight across numerators and straight across denominators. Don't forget that if you have a whole number like 5 times 2/3, you can do 5/1 times 2/3. Then you multiply straight across, and you end up with an improper fraction, which you then have to change into a mixed number. I'm not going to ask you to do that today if you can't remember how, because we will be working on that later in our unit. Let's talk a little bit about adding and subtracting now. So if I ask you to add two fractions, a lot of students think that you use the same rules and that you just go straight across. And you sort of do, but we have to be very careful. We cannot add 1/2 and 1/2 straight across, because if I do, I get 2 and 4, and we know that 2 out of 4 can be simplified to 1/2. And I can draw a picture to show that 1/2 plus 1/2, if I put them together, does not equal 1/2. It actually equals 1/2. So this is not the correct form. Instead, if I want to add 1/2 and 1/2, I add the numerators 1 and 1, which is 2, and I keep this same denominator, which is 2. And 2/2 is the same thing as 1, and we saw that in our picture over here. So if you have common denominators, 4/9 and 2/9, I add my numerators. 4 plus 2 is 6. I keep my denominator. And 6 and 9 share some common factors. This is what we did yesterday in class. 6 and 9 share a common factor of 3. So if I simplify both of these by 3, I end up with a finished fraction of 2/3. So this is the sum of those two fractions. The same rule applies with subtraction. As long as I have the same denominators, I can subtract my numerators. 10 minus 3 is 7, and I keep my denominator of 13. And because 7 and 13 do not share any common factors, then that means this one cannot be simplified. But what happens if they have different denominators? I can't simply add 1 and 2 because I have different denominators. So we have to use something called a common denominator. Typically, you try to find the least common denominator or the lowest common denominator by finding the least common multiple of your two denominators. But if you can think of any common denominator, you can use it because it's going to make it easier for you. I know that if I count by 4s, I say 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And if I count by 5s, I say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And I can stop right there because I see that both of those numbers share a 20. So what I'm going to use is a 20 as my denominator. Now what we're going to use is a concept that we worked on yesterday called equivalent fractions. So I'm going to say I had 1/4, but I want it to say something over 20. I want my numerator to change. So yesterday we looked for patterns in numbers. And the pattern here is that 4 times 5 gives me 20. So if I want an equivalent fraction, I do the same thing here, and 1 times 5 is 5. So this fraction is 5/20. I can do the same thing with 2/5. I need an equivalent fraction for 2/5 that has a denominator of 20. So I look for patterns in my numbers. I know that 5 times 4 gives me 20. So 2 times 4 gives me 8. So this fraction is 8/20. Now what I can do is add my two numbers together. So 5 plus 8 is 13. Because I have common denominators, all I have to do is bring my denominator over. 13 and 20 cannot be simplified. The only factor that they share is 1. And if that's the case, then that means that answer is in simplest form. So this works with any addition or subtraction problem. It doesn't matter which one you're working on. As long as you can find a common denominator, then you can subtract those two numbers. So what if I have 9/10 minus 2/5? Well, I can't do these two fractions because they have different denominators. So what I'm going to do is attempt to find a common denominator for these two fractions. So I count by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40. And I also need to count by 5. So 5, 10, 15. Many of you probably already know what it is. The first number that I get to that's the same is 10. Now I could use 20 because that is a common denominator. It's going to be a little bit of extra work, but I could certainly use 20 if I wanted to. I'm going to use 10. So does that mean I need to change this one at all? Not at all. It's already a denominator of 10. So that's really easy for me because I don't have to change that one. I do have to find an equivalent fraction for 2/5 that has a denominator of 10. So I look for a pattern. How can I jump from 5 to 10? And that's times 2. So I do 2 times 2, and that gives me 4. So this new fraction is 4/10. So now that I have common denominators, I can just subtract across the numerator. So 9 minus 4 is 5. I keep my denominator of 10. And here's a good skill that we worked on yesterday. Can I simplify 5 and 10? And if you know anything about 5 and 10, you know that they share some common factors. Yesterday I tried to get some of you to do this. How can I get 5? I can do 1 times 5. How can I get 10? I can do 1 times 10. I can do 2 times 5. What's the number that you see that shows up in both lists? It's a 5, which means I can simplify both of these numbers by 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So 9/10 minus 2/5 gives me an answer of 1/2. I hope this video helped you review the skills that you are supposed to know in reference to multiplying with fractions, adding and subtracting like denominators, and adding and subtracting unlike denominators. Thank you.